So a lot of people that are aspiring entrepreneurs wonder, okay, well, I have this great idea. What are the steps I need to take to turn that into a company?
There were a lot of meetings, and a lot of slides, and a lot of great ideas that were thrown away.
Sure.
So this actually was, I think, one of 7 ideas that we eventually decided to try to put forward. So you have to be ruthlessly qualifying and objective for your ideas. You can't get too personally attached to anyone.
But when you're at that point where you have no money and you have no employees, I mean, what are kind of the first steps you take in order to create a company from just a group of friends? Or
well, the first is you have to have some money. You have to find either seed capital or you have to invest your own money. And that's what we did in order to stay alive long enough to actually see if one of these ideas is going to work.
Sure.
Fortunately, the idea that we eventually chose actually made money from the very beginning.
That's good.
We were bringing in money, implementing open source software and consulting with companies about the proper way to implement open source software almost from the first month of the company.
Okay, wow. So what advice might you have to other entrepreneurs?
If you've got a good idea, find someone else who you can vet it with and make sure that it really does have legs. And if you can do that, then and that it survives that very objective process, then you've probably got a fundable idea.
Okay, so you get it out there to 100 users or some number of users and get their feedback early on?
Their objective feedback.
So how do you find those objective users?
Well, they're out there. You have to look for people that you respect but don't necessarily like who are in the industry, you'll be willing to meet with you and give you their honest opinion. In the venture capital community, you will find these people. In the media, you will find these people. In the analyst community, you will find these people, and you'll also find it among the executives of successful companies who maybe have a little bit different focus or have a competing product.
Okay.
It never ceased to amaze me during the early months how many CEOs of companies would actually take our calls.
Now you are venture backed, so how did you walk through the process of getting that initial funding?
Well, we were fortunate in that we had contacts in the venture community because a couple of our founders had been successful there before, so we had an audience.
Right.
Now, of course, that's what they say. 50% of success in life is showing up. The other 50% is what you do when you get there. So we had to put together a very compelling story around the idea, and we had to present that story very effectively. In some cases to rooms full of people who were not necessarily friendly to the idea. I mean, it is a little risky. Open source software. Is it proven software? Are there legal questions? Are there technical questions?
Right.
All of these things have to be thought through and addressed.
Were there any bad things that happened? I mean, did you ever get turned down? Did you have to refine your pitch a few times before it worked?
Of course. But fortunately.
We still are.
At what point do you realize that you just need to be persistent and keep going for it? Or do you have to kind of reconvene and rethink, like, is this idea going to even take off? Is it going to become a viable business?
I think that's a constant process. Persistence is something that you either can keep going with something or you can't.
Right.
And it goes across ideas. You persist in the general goal, which is to start a company, but you can't get too attached to an idea. If it's not working, if there's a problem with it, you have to be objective and fix it.
I mean, we still do that. I mean, if our business model is not the same as it was a couple of years ago, if you look at our revenue split, for example, we're now about 60%, what you call license or subscription revenue, about 40% professional services. It was the exact inverse a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So, this doesn't ever end.
Yeah.
I guess maybe if you're PG&E, you can kind of kick back for a little bit. Okay, we're in the electricity business,
but if you're Chrysler,
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So what are the steps that one should take early in their career if ultimately they want to reach the point of becoming an executive of a successful startup or founding a company?
I highly recommend that you develop some kind of specialty, but and go and consult with different companies about that specialty, and then change it. Develop another one and become a consultant in that area as well. In either whether you have a job that has an official title, you can still be an expert, a person within your company that is respected. Those are the kinds of people who have the access to the decision makers in companies.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I think
and then those decision makers become people who trust you, and you can learn who to trust, and that's how you build your contact base, where you can then go forward and build your career.
Okay.
So,
And in terms of, I mean, if we're talking to somebody who's, really young or just starting out, I would say you need to be a little bit of a Renaissance man or woman. You're definitely going to have your area of focus, but you need to learn a little bit about every single part of the business, because especially in small companies, it's going to come on your lap anyway, so you'll learn about it that way. But if you're going to have to go through and think about making a startup, you can't just think about, let's say, what's the technology I want. You've got to think about, well, what is the sales strategy going to be? What's the go-to-market strategy going to be? All these other kinds of things. It doesn't mean you have to be the specialist in those areas. You'd still get those people. But those thoughts do need to go through your head,